a company that knows the benefit of these systems. And so, you know, a lot of people think data storage and they think it's on the blockchain. It's not on the blockchain. So you can think of this as like a blockchain adjacent business, which is really interesting. And this is what I mean where we need to get out of the box of thinking everything's on the blockchain when we talk about use of the blockchain. This is a way, you know, coming from, I worked at Bank of Bowen for 6 years in the suspicious activity response team, thinking about using traditional banking rails to pay storage node operators, you know, all over the world, you know, in rapid payments. It just is not feasible. So the storage token enables us to, you know, to pay storage node operators and to have this system. So it's a competitive advantage for us. And for the good of humanity and society, I hope that other companies get it and, you know, take advantage of the opportunity in blockchain, but I'm certainly not going to tell them it's their responsibility.
That's funny. I love it. Yeah, no, I would agree. There are definitely competitive advantages, and those are very compelling. How do you get over the kind of hurdles that we started off the discussion with? My strategy, you know, when I want to encourage it, which I agree, typically I don't, unless I'm trying to sell. Which in that case, the strategy I have is to propose a pilot and something that is more of a sandbox kind of test, proof of concept, or however you want to define it. And people generally feel comfortable with that because it's safe. They can test it, and they have you know, experts willing to hold their hand and walk them through it. And then if they can feel comfortable with the pilot, then and it goes well, then oftentimes you can get them to the next step. But I have found that it's not really like this, you know, Web 2, right, to Web 3 kind of movement. It's more baby steps, or like kind of taking people by the hand and walking them through it and kind of helping navigate. And right, in this space, it does take a lot of that, because otherwise people are, like we started off discussing, very intimidated just to jump into the deep end of the pool. My strategy has been to offer kind of these sandbox or pilot, you know, experiences, tests.
I think you made a good example in terms of the delineation between a mechanic and an operator of a vehicle. We kind of are at the 30,000 feet of what blockchain is and is not doing in terms of regulatory framework and from the legal perspective. I'd like to come down more to sort of the where our feet are 101. You know, there is a difference between the permissioning of blockchains, public blockchains, enterprise blockchains. How would you best explain to, say, your average small to medium-sized business owner, just the general difference between what is enterprise blockchain and what is a public blockchain? This is a sort of blockchain 101, if you will, for anybody listening who's curious, just so that they can follow some of the verbiage we may use going forward.
Right. So, you know, well, if I say traditionally, only a few years back, typically enterprise blockchain wasn't really referred to as blockchain at all. And in a lot of cases, it's not. In most cases, what's happening at the enterprise use case level is DLT, distributed ledger technology. And you know, the reason DLT is used instead of blockchain, it signifies that it's not a public ledger. And a lot of companies don't want a public ledger for what they're doing. They're putting data, you know, on, you know, a very public place, and companies typically do not like sharing data. That, you know, it started off as enterprise blockchain stuff with all DLT. There wasn't much discussion of using public blockchains in this kind of enterprise realm, but as kind of the knowledge of like Solidity and smart contract development and kind of these no-code, low-code tools came about, you're seeing more enterprise use cases happening, you know, on public blockchains with smart contracts, with zero knowledge proof mechanisms like ZK rollups that make it possible to do these things in a more private manner while using a public ledger. So right now, it's about, depending on the use case, depending on, you know, the product that companies are either innovating or adopting, it's mixed. But you're seeing more movement to public chains because the good thing about the public, decentralized public blockchains, is the decentralization. It's the resiliency, the redundancy, the immutability, and resistance to censorship and all those things. Not to say that it's necessary. In a lot of cases, blockchain, Katherine and I had this conversation the other day, in a lot of cases, companies want to adopt blockchain or roll out a blockchain product just to say they're doing it because it's a buzzword. And a lot of cases, like a SQL database might be just as good. And you can look at maybe 75% of blockchain use cases and think to yourself, or lots of, these advanced technologies, in different instances, is this even necessary, right? A lot of cases it's not. So, that's maybe a longer answer than necessary. But
yeah, I think that's a great answer. That's spot on. And one thing I want to pick up on that we were kind of touching on a little bit was, talking about adoption and talking about different stakeholders, understanding the benefits and understanding enough of how things work to be able to think about what the possibilities are. I do think that there is a sort of crypto culture that does tend to kind of get in the way. And I wish that more people would recognize this moment in the development of blockchain, as a parallel to the development of the internet, because there are so many streams in common. And I think that if people were to recognize that it is that significant, then there would be more of an effort to try to educate oneself. Like I love Stephen Colbert. I love watching the show, and then he drives me nuts because he makes these comments like, "Oh yeah, I was talking to my, brother-in-law, and he started talking about NFTs," and and the whole audience groans, and it's like, that perpetuating this idea that it's all crypto bros, and there's, it doesn't have anything to offer the marginalized people or communities that are really hurting and could really benefit from the technology is very frustrating. And I think it's, I kind of reflect on it a little bit, and it's like, well, with the internet, I think early on in the early days, a lot of people were like, wow, this would be really great to address like really pressing problems of, poverty and, social ills and, lack of peace, and people will come together. And then it really wasn't used for that. So, it's not, so it's not too surprising.
That is true.
Right? It's not surprising that people aren't like, oh, blockchain, this is going to solve the world's problems. I think there was that a little bit at the beginning. And like I said, that's what drew me to it. But I feel like we're getting to a point now where some of the issues we're dealing with, climate change in particular, and the divide, so the social divides, are the social divide in our country, the lack of harmony, the lack of ability to move forward and solve some of these problems. Like I said, I think that those problems are gaining on us, and we're losing ground because these technologies can be used to address a lot of those problems. I mean, like, is blockchain the cure-all and the answer to everything? No, of course it's not. Is cryptocurrency? No, of course it's not. Is, a central bank digital currency, a CBDC, a great idea in the US? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But what about for a country that has wildly fluctuating currency, where a family can lose their all of their life savings in a day just because of the moves in the market? So I think that it's important to think about it in the context of, what is the problem that we're trying to address, and how can we get past this thinking of, crypto as this kind of concept that's just impenetrable. I would like to see more people feel free to ask questions and talk very simply and plainly about it, and to see those of us working in this area be open to helping educate others about it.
I always use the analogy of, if I look at the internet as a whole and then PayPal, And if I look at blockchain as a whole and crypto, there is a specific use case really that's sort of carved it out. You think of the gold rush, in 1940 or in 1849, and there were people who went and decided to search for gold and mine gold, and that was their way to find riches. So there were those who decided they would sell jeans like Levi Strauss, or they would sell the pickaxes and the shovels. And I think this room is full of people that are either making or improving or finding ways to distribute as many pickaxes and shovels as far abroad as we can, decentralize the tool that is these new safe storage containers, right? Storage with a J, of course. And one of the reasons why I think it's so important when I have this conversation with people, they ask me, "Oh, you're in crypto," and I said, realistically, do you have a debit card? And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, how is your Forex trading going?" And they're like, "Well, I don't trade Forex." I'm like, "Well, because I have a crypto wallet doesn't mean that I'm a quant trader." Right? And there's an optics there that you guys are really bringing up to the surface here. That what blockchain is really it's a tool, but we're able to go from command line to a GUI interface. And I think once we can put it in front of people that an iPhone is intuitive. My daughter's 3.5, knows how to operate and do the things she needs to do. How do we take blockchain, and what are some of the ways you are currently seeing blockchain being distributed in a much more user-friendly fashion? Other projects that you've seen globally, maybe brag on a couple of things that you were like, wow, this is really innovative.
Yeah, I mean, I love these questions. These are great. So this movement towards command line interface to these no code GUI interfaces. This is a really big deal. And going back to the last question, inclusion and financial inclusion, and that's something that I'm still very passionate about, but maybe a little bit demoralized or frustrated about because of what's going on in crypto, right, in the markets. Rafael knows, like, I'm very involved in a project in Tampa to deliver education and training and job opportunities and networking to urban communities that haven't had these pathways into the innovation economy. And really, we had really brilliant people coming in and teaching about DeFi and how to bank yourself and all this stuff. But, then 2022 happened. And then it's like, well, how do you feel good about encouraging people to use these tools in a way that they're not going to get wrecked and end up in a worse position than if they hadn't, right? So that is a big deal. But I think this movement from like CLI to no code definitely like opens up this, it democratizes the technology. And I think my hope is that as that happens, you kind of crowd out these greedy people who are kind of taking advantage of others who have less knowledge than them, right? The SPFs, the Celsiuses, and all that stuff. I think that's my goal with my team's goal with the Summon platform. Typically, historically, DAOs started off as being something you would have to be a developer to participate in. And we weren't certainly the first to develop a no-code DAO tooling platform, right? There's a lot of them in the Ethereum ecosystem, but I do think that ours is best, and I think that we're making it so easy that easier and easier that pretty soon anybody will be able to participate in these things. Like we have homeowners associations getting in touch and wanting to know how they can govern on chain or off chain, saving results of things like storage or IPFS or Arweave. So we have a legislator who's we're working with to help him do polling, like sentiment polling of his constituents on issues using our polling feature. Basically, what we're trying to do is build, like you said, the launch pad, if you will, offer the infrastructure for people to build their own businesses, communities, projects in this online. Sorry, that's my daily 1:30 alarm. In this Web3 environment, and I think that's going to bring a lot of people into the new economy that's we all see emerging, and hopefully that renews kind of our faith in this technology to bring people, yeah, like, well, I'm repeating myself, but I think it's such an important point. Hopefully that's what you noted, Rafael. Hopefully that's what actually makes this inclusion happen, because for a while it was like, oh, great, this is going backwards.
So I'm going to just take a minute here for those of you guys that are online. If you'd like to submit questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we will put them in here. But I'm going to go back over to Katherine here. What are some of the more impressive things that you've seen? Because you're really at the bleeding edge, right? There is nothing that we will do in the future that does not require data. So everything touches what you do. What are some of the things that you're seeing that are encouraging and really maybe even eye-opening to the decentralization and the shift in terms of leverage of power to the individual rather than the entity?
Well, I've been really impressed with what we can do when we have affordable data storage. So last year we started Storage Institute, which is a 501c nonprofit based here in Minnesota. Bridget Duran, who helped start Blockchain Association, is the executive director. And we did this because you started out with a question about responsibility and, what is a corporation's or what is a business's responsibility? I see our responsibility more in recognizing the impact that technology is having and is going to have on our communities globally. And, taking learnings from the past and building responsible technology. And to me, what that means is that the more that technology and like the IoT and the Internet of Things, the more that it gets embedded into our day-to-day life and becomes more intimate in our lives, the greater impact it's going to have. And we can't see just yet how it's going to impact us and what questions are going to come up from it, what legal questions are going to come up. We didn't need all of the, laws around privacy until surveillance was as ubiquitous as it is, for example. So I'm jumping around here a little bit, but I'll come back to Storage Institute. I did want to mention that I'm involved with a couple of groups. One is the Wilson Center Digital Assets Forum, and our goal is to help educate policymakers so that they understand this technology as they're making decisions about it. I'm also involved with, I serve on the board of the Institute for Security and Technology. Similarly, what we're doing is we're looking at what are the trends that are happening in the technology that's being built. We know that it takes a while for laws and regulations to keep up. What are those things? How can we, anticipate them and address them? They recently came out, they did a ransomware task force where they came out with a report on ransomware. I also chair the board of my child's school. So I have a 7th grader. And so ransomware is something, and, responsible security is something that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. So like, as we're in tech, it's like, I don't have a tech background, but I've seen the ways that it impacts our lives. And I think it's important for all citizens to not shy away from it, not be afraid of it, but to go into it and embrace the learning about it. So going back to Storage Institute, one of our goals is to raise awareness and education about emerging technologies and opportunities within them. We saw in Web 2 some of the pitfalls in not having diverse groups of people building the technology that is impacting everybody.
Amen.
So I think that, as a company that's building, emerging technology, it's our responsibility to make sure that we don't make those same mistakes. Not because we're just doing good, but because for the security and well-being of all of our communities, our global communities, that's really critical. So we have a grant program that identifies founders who are building technologies that help address issues that typically disparately impact marginalized groups, and or are being built by founders from previously or currently underrepresented backgrounds, because we've also seen with those companies, women-led companies, minority-led companies, that you also typically have greater diversity. And so this is kind of how we're addressing these, the problems that the, technology has created as it's been built. and trying to build it differently. We also share those learnings. We just came out with our second diversity, equity, and inclusion report that spells out exactly how we go about doing that. We're looking to share that information and hoping to get feedback, hoping others pick up on it. This second report that we've done also addresses environmental, social, and governance issues because again, we're building this technology, but the regulations and laws aren't in place yet to identify the risks and address them to force the responsible building of technology. So that I think is incumbent on those of us who are operating in these areas to do that on our own.
Yeah, I got audience question.
Go for it.
This is Eric Agama for the audience. This is from Roland Silva out of the UK. He said, even the laws are narrowly defined and always full intake innovation from a legal perspective, doesn't that stymie innovation or give unfair advantage to larger and much funded players over smaller startups? How would you overcome this barrier?
Yeah, it does.
I think, can we combine question, I think question one and question two here, I think I can put into one here. One of the questions here that Roland asked is about the sort of the arbiter of truth, you know, one central point of what is knowledge. And I think back to sort of what you guys are saying as the through line is there needs to be some sentiment change. I think of the internship with Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn when they keep saying, put it on the line, right? When everybody says, you know, blockchain solves that, right? Or blockchain can handle that.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt made a comment that not everything needs to be blockchain, right? You know, we have this propensity to add complexity for the sake of complexity because it can benefit a company that they can charge for, you know, protecting their IP of that complexity. How can we take the simplicity of, you know, what is truth or where truth is? And this is in regards to land titles, which I'm going to toss over to Matt. But I think of the blue and black dress or the white and gold dress on the internet, right? And if you don't remember, it was people see different colors. And so when we talk about central truth, Joseph Henrich in his book, The Weirdest People in the World, talks about how most of our studies are geared from a Western educated, industrialized, rich and developed mindset, as opposed to a kinship-based mindset, which you have all over places like Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, all of these regions. When we talk about truth, is there a value to either the community's version of truth, which is distributed across the ledger? How can we protect things that there's no argument over, right? I can tell you where the I call it the tent stake of my neighbor is, right? Nobody might agree where my property line ends, but I can tell you for sure where my neighbor's does. It doesn't matter where you go in the country, that you can ask somebody in Peru. Hernando de Soto talked about the dogs knew the edge of their owner's property line without having to reference a blockchain. How can we take things like land and title and provide people access to limited liability or parametric insurance, those kind of things? What's the benefit there from a blockchain sort of constituency mindset?
Yes, I think that's a great use case to bring up. You know, so right now, just to kind of level set, the way title to real property is tracked is county by county in each state. And a lot of these counties, especially rural ones, they don't even have these things online. You're digitized in their own system, and some companies do paper records. Many others still, if they integrate like older records, have them on these microfiche. I don't even know, I'm too young to even tell you with microfiche what that comes after that, but I know what it is, you know, but basically, and when you're closing on a real estate transaction, in every instance, you need title insurance. So you actually need a title company to go and research the chain of title to make sure that, you know, there's no liens, for instance, or encumbrances or easements or, you know, anything that would cloud the title to the property you're buying, because you want to know that you actually are getting the bundle of rights that you think you are. So it's a very kind of manual human process. There's like human intervention. So what blockchain is nice for this use case is because basically it's this immutable ledger. It can go on forever and it can track ownership, and you can, you know, digitize these records and you can actually store them. They're not going to be, you know, NFTs, for instance, the JPEGs attached to them. right? As people understand NFTs, they're not actually stored on the blockchain. The blockchain isn't a place for storage. Storage is a place for storage, right? Counties can and hopefully it's at a larger level, maybe a state level. But I think storage in the future is probably booming with real estate title records. And basically, it takes this process that's very friction heavy and unnecessarily just antiquated, and we have this technology that tracks things on a ledger, and it's kind of this single agreed upon source of truth, this collective, consensus-driven source of truth. It takes away all of the friction. It's a great use case for blockchain. It's going to be great business for Katherine, and I would like to see it because it just frustrates me that we still have this like 1950s solution.
So will title companies go the way of the elevator operator, do we think here?
Well, it's interesting. I've had conversations with title companies, and some are very afraid of blockchain because, like we started off saying, right, it's a threat to their status quo model. Others are very innovative and enterprising and saying, how can we get ahead of the curve? How can we get the advantage that Katherine mentioned? And right, those are the players, I think, the curious, innovative explorer types that I think are going to, find themselves in a major opportunity, because I would say most of the title industry is more, they know it's inevitable, it's changing, but like a year, 2 years ago, I think they were very, very threatened by it. And now it's kind of like, well, they're going to go extinct.
5 stages of grief.
Right. They're in denial, and now it's, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think those challenges force us to evolve, and that's okay. That can be a good thing. I do think that we need to start educating the kids sooner. I'd like to see more blockchain education in schools. I think the US will be at a severe competitive disadvantage if we don't. And that goes back to the whole crypto culture notion. You go to some of the conferences there, it does perpetuate the image of crypto bra, and there have been some issues that have come out of some of the conventions and things, and I think it is up to those who are in this industry, including people who are not marginalized, to step forward and acknowledge that if we have just a narrow group of people solving a problem, we're not going to be identifying all the problems that we need to solve. And so I know that's a little off topic, but I just think that that's so critical, as this technology evolves.
I think, yeah, so I just want to reiterate what Katherine said. That I don't think innovation is most effective if it's one group of people who look like each other, think like each other, come from the same background. That's not how we're going to come up with game-changing, world-changing breakthroughs, right? And you shouldn't want to innovate with people who all think just like you. It's a disadvantage.
That's not innovation, that's installation.
Yeah,
right.
And I think sometimes people hear that and they think, oh, white men aren't allowed. Not at all. It's that, we have to acknowledge that we have technology that can address really pressing problems that are going to be serious issues to our very existence, including around climate change if we don't start addressing this. And that there are, if allowed to innovate, that there are solutions that can be found. Looking at storage, for example, the technology uses hard drives that, primarily they've already been purchased, so this is, if you take a look at where is the environmental impact, it's in the manufacture and the distribution, the transporting of that technology. And, most disk drives are severely underused. And the idea, taking just that kind of approach of what do we have already that we don't need to create anew? How can we maximize the resources that we're already using? There are, a number of different, industries and verticals that could take that kind of approach. And I think that data centers comprise like 3% of the, the power that's used.
And that doesn't include the mineral demand in terms of the resources to assemble said data centers. There's a man, his name is Simon Michaud, and I believe he's with one of the Finnish colleges. And he talks about the difference between what we would need to electrify the whole planet. I think blockchain is interesting because what it does is it takes the existence of currently siloed, centralized databases that make it very easy for something like an Experian hack or an Equifax hack to happen. Because all you have to do is find one door into the building that has everything, as opposed to putting data at the edge. And I'm really with Roland, who asked again, when he talked about blockchain education, I do a lot of speaking in the same vein as you guys in terms of what this is. And we have a problem, and I would say this is not specific to the US, it's specific more towards a capitalist hyper-individual mindset of, the education of giving someone power to transact and do things where there is impermanent loss is a very real risk, right? All you need is one farmer's widow in Iowa who sends a payment to her daughter for $10,000 because they sold a piece of property and it goes to the wrong person. And then all of a sudden we have senators and representatives getting involved. What is the responsibility for us as individuals who are familiar with the technology to make sure that we can educate people to the level where they can be individual agents of themselves? Because humans love to externalize the cost for simplicity, right? We've done this since the internet started, when we thought it was going to be great. And now as I scroll, AI tells me what I see next. How do we teach people that is a real responsibility first, give people individual ownership, and then educate them on blockchain?
I think collaboration is the key. This is a difficult environment in many ways. We're dealing with, constrained resources. And, but when we put our efforts together, there's so much more we can do, like Storage is a member of the Blockchain Association. So we're one of over 100 different companies that are interested in seeing the kind of regulatory clarity we need for responsible innovation. I'm done at the end of the day. I'm tired. A lot of these things I don't want to do. I don't necessarily want to, be on board of my kids' school, but I know that if I am, I'm going to be tuned in and I'm going to, be able to contribute what bit I can to help. We went to the Minnesota blockchain event last night and I was tired. I didn't really want to go at first. And then I got there, and, I saw you, Rafael, and, I heard from someone from the Federal Reserve talking about blockchain development from his perspective and, things like this. I wanted to turn on The Office and, just veg out and just chill out. And, instead I had started this YouTube video called The AI Dilemma.
So good.
I highly, highly recommend it. So it's like, because I know I have to learn about this stuff to be able to share this information with others, to learn from others. So it's a certain responsibility, and it's really hard because, sometimes you just want to, especially when you think about the impact of, AI, great opportunities, but also a lot of scary stuff. And like you think about how do we work together to have responsible development and technology, and it can be exhausting just thinking about it, but it's up to us, and we have to do it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the education component, that's like starting early. This is so important for kids to learn. And I don't think we have the adequate expertise in the school systems right now because, part of like educators' education did not prepare them for what we're seeing with AI and Web3 and all of these technologies that literally could probably end the world somehow. or cause you to lose your money, get scammed, or not be able to take advantage of opportunities in the digital life economy, or having access to financial services. List goes on. I'm not a good educator. I'll be the first one to admit. I spend my day in the weeds, deep down, and then if someone asks me what's blockchain, I will spend a few seconds just looking blankly and think, oh, where do I start? But what I do is the collaboration, or participating in projects where we can make the technology easy and available to people who can actually use it and understand, in any way that I can support the education, or I just respect it. We have, Dr. Tammy, I saw join. She's someone who can explain this stuff. Talking to her, she's doing the Lord's work out there, right? And I anytime I see what she's doing on LinkedIn, I don't know if liking a post on LinkedIn is like, oh yeah, I'm such a supporter of blockchain education, but it excites me when I see what people like Tammy are doing. I think the education component is necessary, and I think there needs to be more advocacy, like Katherine is doing and talking about. And I'm thinking, man, I need to be more of an advocate for the early education.
One thing briefly that Storage Institute did last year that I think was impactful was we had something called Revolution, which was out in Howard Lake, and we had 3 tracks where people with different backgrounds, jobs, roles came together and shared what they knew, and it was a safe space to ask the questions. I think people are afraid to ask questions, but they're also not learning then if you're not asking the question, and if you're not creating an environment where people feel free to ask the question, then you're not helping. So the idea was to expand the networks. It was primarily people who've been underrepresented in tech, and they came from all over the country. So they were sharing their networks with each other, sharing their knowledge with each other, looking at ways that we can collaborate across, art, finance, and in investing. We had folks from Brown Venture Group here in Minnesota that is investing in Black and brown owned businesses. We had people there. So exposing and sharing our networks, opening our networks, I think it's really important. Eric is phenomenal at that.
I think it's interesting that we continue to come back to the power of the node in the network, right? It's who you know, because if I don't have a way, I am a Luddite in terms of my ability here, but I know exactly when I'm out of my depth. And if it's legal, Matt will get a text from me at 2 o'clock in the morning when I just finished a call in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, hey, I got a question. I hope you see this in the morning. And he may text back because he's a dad. I think the important piece is about how do we share that base level knowledge so people don't have that fear, right? M-Pesa is my favorite example, because people will do commerce if you give them a way to do it and they understand the tools. M-Pesa is a great way to do that. It is a digital currency for all intents and purposes, right? Traded amongst a community, moves with velocity, and it does what a store of value is meant to do. I feel like blockchain got a black eye from the crypto pump and dumps. There was 30,000 tokens, and now it's down to 20,000. Some people had hoped for a longer crypto winter to kind of bring out some of the less utility focused projects. I'm trying to be as democratic as possible here. But talking to you guys, I'm hopeful about what it is, because you're talking about including everyone and empowering them to be able to recognize risk where they are and giving them tools to mitigate risk at arm's length using local resources that speak the local language. And I think at the end of the day, these global problems can only be solved block by block, if we want to use a blockchain pun. I thank you for the hope. We're in a couple more minutes here, but Eric.
Thank you, Rafael, for an amazing job. And I want to thank Katherine and Matthew here. For those that are online, my name is Eric Kagama, the president and also the CEO of the Africa Chamber of Digital Commerce. And that's the other hat that I wear as an advocate on the advocacy site. And I also run what is called QBI, currently in partnership with Summon Lab. Summon Lab is to be a liquid cell. as a president of a chamber, always constantly what we're looking at is duality to us, especially immigrants. America is home for one, and then we have where we came from as well. Everybody's from somewhere, I understand, but for us that through either through school or something that brought us in the States and then we decided to stay. We want to add significant value here. I know the diaspora economy locally, it's over $70 billion a year what they put in the local economy. Because diasporans alone put in that much in the African economy every. So imagine if about 70 or 80% of what they make, from the 95, goes back to the local economy. So we just want to make sure that is acknowledged, and then able to look at some of the challenges when it comes to supporting family members as well. What part does question to Katherine and also Matthew? What is going to be? What do you think? How do you think that the blockchain technology is going to be leveraged in a way that it affects the economy of communities, where they can relate to it, where in the part of where the government oversees its business, right on capital. So symbolically, I wanted to make this kind of a subliminal way, where the conversation, I know me and blockchain and others are in the forefront of it, but we wanted to make sure there's engagement on the public side and also general public as well. So what are the things that you observe that, how this technology can be best leveraged for communities so that they can relate to it? They know it affects their personal economy. I don't know if it's playing up, but give it a shot.
Yeah, I think some of it was touched on in a couple of different ways. It's important that the technology be allowed to be developed. And I know it's the House Financial Services Committee that's working on coming out with some legislation in the near future that pulls in ideas from the Responsible Financial Innovation Act that I think are useful and gets us out of this box of thinking just of digital assets as a utility token versus a security. So I think that you've got government working, and especially with Biden's you've got some movement there, so that's encouraging. You've got people saying, hey, it's not all just crypto bras out there. And, it may sound like a foreign language and all of that, but it's starting to be used and adopted enough that people, like me, an English lit major from rural Wisconsin, is involved in this and recognizing, the value of it. And people like Matt who come from, more traditional backgrounds professionally are moving into it. So you've got those things moving forward. And then you've got the personal experiences. Eric, I shared with you that, I have an older daughter. Her father's from Sierra Leone, West Africa, and he was a political dissident and, in the war there, writing under his own name. And people were saying, you got a bounty on your head, you can't do this. As we tried to get money to him to help him, we couldn't. And so there are still issues with structure of societies that that need support to be able to access the technology, but this technology is going to be more accessible. It is more accessible than traditional finance for some communities that really need it, including areas where women aren't allowed to have their own bank accounts, including areas where micropayments for, teaching cooking online, teaching how to make something online are where that kind of micro economy and micro businesses can actually develop. So it's like we've got to get these areas of these motions that are toward enabling the development of the technology to come together with folks. And I know there are a number of groups who are working on, blockchain groups, like blockchain, like this group, the Digital Chamber of Commerce, that are working on making those connections and those collaborations with people in the community, because they're going to know best how, to make it work and how to take advantage of the different benefits that it can bring, but it's going to be collaborative. It's going to have to be collaborative.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry, I'm clearing my throat there, but I totally agree. The collaborative nature, I think I want to just add the social aspect. I read recently that Telegram is going to, move into Web3, and what the model kind of sounds like a Web3 style like WeChat, right, which is so popular in China and just massive. And you combine that financial plus social, I think that's like the killer app. I'm interested to see what Telegram does, but I think we're going to see more of these things where it is collaborative, it's social, but it's also financial, and Web3, blockchain, these off-chain tools like storage, like these things can come together and build products that meet the needs of people on all different fronts, and people don't have to go to different places to use them, but more importantly, they can connect with their communities and socialize and message with their friends and family while using the tech. That to me is something that will drive adoption. Something I also will mention that I learned from Mr. Hagama here is personalizing things, right? Making it people interested in using the tech, right? Giving them a reason to. Eric talks about the interest of the diaspora community in investing back in Africa, which I think is really something. If you talk about it, it's very profound, and giving them a way to do that. Right now, it's very difficult, if you're outside the continent. But if you give them that opportunity, and it is tech enabled, people will start using the tech that way too. So I think that in all cases, it's kind of this collaboration between people, tech, both blockchain and off-chain, and kind of and finance basically.
I think the advent of digital technology really made the ability to multiply or replicate infinite. And I think that blockchain technology helps us provide scarcity, which is necessary inside of a community. And by scarcity, I think I look at it more as dominion and provenance. So we know where things can come from, and without knowing who's on the other side, I can know that the transaction that we need to do is verified, right? Whether I'm standing at a bar and I need to know whether you are or are not 21, I don't need to be able to see your address and show up at your house 2 weeks later with flowers because I memorized your address when I saw your ID, right? That's not information. I work very, very deeply in the identity space, because as we talk about agency and wallets and to be your own custodian, right? The banks are worried because they are able to charge a lot to be custodians and the arbiters of who has what where. We can now digitize that. What is it? It just took me 100 lines of Python to eliminate your industry, right? There's a lot of the banking infrastructure rails that can operate on Web3 with far less friction. Remittances is a great example, right? The average cost of remittances, depending on the country, is anywhere between 12 and 20% of that $70 billion. Think if we put 10% of that $70 billion back into Africa, right? Not taken by the rentier class, right? The people in the middle who are just adding the friction when it's supposed to be frictionless. I think I'm just empowered to realize that with better regulatory clarity here in the United States, the rest of the world, I would say, is running this race, and we're arguing about which shoelaces we can wear. How can we get the public engaged to help inform the politicians that what regulatory clarity does is it lets the people who don't want to work in the gray and just want to run good businesses and provide value, it protects us more so than the people who are not going to follow the rules anyways. How can we be a better service as stewards of this knowledge to inform the greater community and have conversations that bring it to the forefront?
I think by featuring examples of real world use cases, one of the things we do at Storage is we have a speaker series where we bring in people who are either working in Web3 or who have developed some solution, whether it's digital identity, or if it's data management for companies, and we have them come and speak to the company. We do this once a month, every other month. We've had Turn Signal come. We've had
Could you mention a little bit about turn signal?
Sure.
That's a very, very novel use case that is absolutely life-saving.
Yeah,
If you-
yeah, and these things aren't necessarily, built on the blockchain, but it's about emerging technology. And, what is, I'm so excited about storage is that it's so affordable. So especially for founders and developers who don't have resources, going to Roland's question, or who have very limited resources, they're able to, build using storage. So Turn Signal is an app that was built in here in Minneapolis, I believe, or in the Twin Cities, by Jazz Hampton and two others.
I don't remember the other guy's names.
Are escaping me right now. And it's an app. If you're pulled over by the police, you open the app and it connects you with legally trained people, lawyers, who can walk you through an interaction with the police to de-escalate any interactions that might otherwise, be escalating. And it was really fascinating to hear him learn about the legwork that they had to do beforehand, working again in collaboration with law enforcement, because you can imagine if you were to just like spin this out into society, without doing the work ahead of time to help, law enforcement understand that this tool was actually going to benefit them as well, by, recording the interaction and, having somebody there who is informed about, everybody's rights, guiding them through this. And so he did that, they did that groundwork with law enforcement, partnered together with them, and have rolled this out into the communities to great success. And it's building all across the country. So we bring in people to talk about the things that they're building, how they do it, what the challenges are, and how others can be inspired or learn from them as well. So I'm all about, again, going back to the collaboration aspect and sharing knowledge.
You mentioned the cognitive dissonance of people who are unaware. It's hard to ask questions, right? We have PhDs and MBAs and people who are educators at the top of their game, right? But they don't know how to teach blockchain, crypto, AI, machine learning, distributed infrastructure, decentralized technologies. I'm blessed to be friends with Vriti Shroff, who is the founder of Ed3 DAO. And they have over 100,000 educators who are on their platform just to learn enough to teach their second grade class how to use video game engines to teach physics, or how to use blockchain and DAOs to start a business, right? And this is that forefront, right? The teachers are there for the students. I think what we need is we have an age in which people are living much longer and will participate a lot more in sort of a secondary economy where it's not full-time, but they're going to supplement the longer they live. Is there a better way to approach having a conversation with people that just can help fight that fear by letting them know that it's okay to ask stupid questions? Because I remember when I started, I was like YouTubing and Googling. Funny part is, at my level that I'm still at, I'm still doing the same thing. So just, telling people that even the people who've been here since the beginning have only been doing this for 10 years, right? You're not that far behind.
Have you heard about when the regulators were investigating Bernie Madoff? There was a junior associates on it, on the investigation. And they were seeing things they didn't understand. And there was some fear about asking questions because they assumed this was just too complex and they didn't understand it. If you don't ask the questions, that's when you really have the serious problems. And I think that takes a cultural shift, especially in tech companies. And I'm glad that I'm in people ops. I don't have a people ops or an HR background, but I did see coming from the East Coast to the West Coast, going from Wall Street to Silicon Valley, this cultural difference and feeling like a total outsider. English lit major all of a sudden in tech, and it was really intimidating. But Katie Hahn was on board, and I saw her speak at some public event, and she was just breaking it down in really simple terms. And I think sometimes you hear people talking about it and they're throwing out these words and all this jargon. And I really encourage people just to keep it simple. keep it as simple as you can. And one of the best things that I did as I was getting into this world was to explain it to my mom, who is 78 and grew up in, very severe, impoverished conditions, and, struggled with even having a bank account, being able to open a bank account. And so by teaching her, that's, I taught in between college and law school. And if you can teach somebody something, then you can really learn it. So I encourage, like at storage, I encourage people who are not on the engineering team to talk about the technology, to get more comfortable with it. That helps with imposter syndrome also. We also pay very, careful attention to the language we use. People talk about a technical person versus a non-technical person. Everybody's technical in some aspect or another. So, I encourage people to be mindful about their language, to use more inclusive language, to say somebody's technically trained or not technically trained or has a technical background or not. So all of these things I think can help create inclusion, which can help build confidence, which enables people to feel comfortable asking questions. And then we also have very practical things we do, like a mentoring program, to partner one-on-one, people with more experience who are more junior.
Each one teach one.
Yeah, and you notice I don't say older or younger, just trying to kind of get into the language of things and pay attention to the language that we use and recognize that there are words that you can use that really are isolating. So we try to be mindful about all of that. We talk about that in the DEI report too.
Yeah, totally. It's a cultural thing. It's almost like a contest, like who's been in this longer, who knows, who can use more technical jargon. And that's the worst thing about, not just blockchain, a lot of tech spaces that you find, but blockchain especially, the crypto bro kind of culture and stereotype. It's real, unfortunately. I really dislike it. People need to feel comfortable asking questions. I wouldn't have made it this far or this long into being in this space if I was afraid to ask questions, because but a lot of people are, right? And I can understand why. I mean, I don't take myself too seriously. Oftentimes I can be humble and admit when I don't know something, but in this current kind of culture, it's not really like a safe space for people to like admit that they don't know, because then they think, oh, I'm not worthy to be in this space, right? But the truth is, like Katherine said, whether you're technically trained or not, this is an industry and it takes people of all skills, and everyone's got something that they're talented at or can learn, even if it's, I'll never, learn coding, right? But I'll never need to. And I think people need to feel comfortable coming to this community social events, like the Minnesota blockchain event that happened last night.
Or off-chain.
Off-chain, Web3 MSP,
The storage
African
events.
Chamber of Digital Commerce.
ACOFDC,
Yeah, all this stuff. I mean, most of what we're talking about, other than when there's speakers, it isn't really tech heavy or anything to do with tech. It's like, oh, hey, how are you doing? Like normal conversation. Anyone can come. We need to kind of foster this welcoming and inclusive environment that makes it okay and safe to ask questions. And I try to do that however I can, and hopefully people can see that, I'm an urban studies major, right? And an attorney, and I'm not educated in tech, nor did I plan to get into tech, right? I kind of got there because I saw how cool the tech was and where I thought it was going, but maybe I would have prepared more had I thought that earlier. But it goes back to the education. Like I probably had plenty of opportunities to do all these things, right? Not everyone does. I'm sure I did, but I didn't see why. Because you need a level of education to understand why these things are important. Maybe in the 90s when I was growing up, it wasn't as clear how rapidly technology would change our society and world. And now it's obvious. And with my 1-year-old son, I'm trying to teach him about, blockchain and AI, like already he doesn't know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to make sure that he's prepared for this new world we're entering, because I think it's really critical. And a lot of people, like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are trying to go to Mars and the moon. And there's a whole lot of people who are going to get left behind. And I think like we need to arm them with the knowledge so that, you know, we can't get everyone, you're right? But we can try to save as many people as we can from this disparity that I'm terrified is it's there, it's growing, and AI is about to hyper accelerate this disparity. And you know, there's a lot of groups trying to do this, like the AI education project that where Tanner's running out of Tampa, and other plenty of groups, right?
I mean, there's what, 450 individuals have signed the letter now.
Yeah.
The slow down.
People aren't ready. And there's not enough education in place. There's not enough funding for education in this area. I think that's a terrible mistake. And if we let this get out of control, where we have this great divide between there's rich and there's poor, it's not going to be good for anyone, right?
This Twin Cities has really got a great opportunity. You know, some of it comes from painful circumstances. But there's a responsibility here. You know, it's a tech hub, you know, and we can create healing and growth by having an inclusive tech community here. When we're planning the Webolution this year, I reached out to Shalisa and I said, hey, Twin Cities Startup Week, is it happening Friday in the morning or Friday in the afternoon? Because I'm going to plan around it and I'm going to let folks know about it. You know, so just that kind of working together, I think, is really important. And one thing I wanted to make a plug for is making sure, you know, that if you are in a position to open doors, you know, that you make sure that you do. One of the things that I'm interested in, kind of what happens psychologically, and my daughter is a psychologist. I'm interested in what happens psychologically when, you know, when we have inclusion and diversity and when we don't. And one of the things that happens is the amygdala hijack. So the amygdala is the fight or flight response. And so our fight or flight response is triggered when we see something that's unusual. And therefore, you know, if all we see are people who look the same, who are leaders in tech companies, that's what we're going to expect to see. But the more diversity we bring in, the more it normalizes it. And so that it helps defeat that unconscious bias. You know, so I think that, you know, having diverse advisors, boards of directors, you know, and helping prepare people to be in those leadership roles who might not otherwise have that background and training is really critical for those of us who are in a position to do that.
I always think about what my daughter sees when she looks on stage and sees someone like you. She realizes that she can grow into that, right? But if you don't see someone who looks like you, that possibility is unseen. I tell the story of the Wright brothers. There was like 5 people on the beach. You know, they flew for 2 years unpowered to get data, right? We don't do that anymore. We don't do 2 years of data first before we put an engine on it. We just put the engine on it and let it go and see what happens, right? The atom bomb is a perfect example. We can give people free energy. But I said, we can blow stuff up. Let's try to blow stuff up first, okay? I think with blockchain, we can protect everybody's fiefdom and let the super rich stay super rich, or we can democratize the access. We can take the verbiage out. I had a very telling conversation in Miami a couple of years ago with a founder. And I asked him, why do we not have good UX or UI so that everyone can approach this? And why does it require a desktop when I can't do it on a phone? And they were maybe had some cocktails, and I got the most honest answer I'd ever heard. And the answer was, you know, the same people that used to put me into lockers and pick on me because I knew the nerd stuff or the computer stuff or the math stuff, they want to play at my party now. And so I want them to have to learn some nerd stuff because I want them to come to me. And I was like, are you okay? Do you need a hug? Because there was so much hurt behind it. But it was a very true, honest opinion that they were trying to keep people out because he had been left out in the past. And so for me, if we don't start with kindness, if we don't start with equity, if we don't start with inclusion, if we don't start with everyone is everyone, period, full stop, we cannot push this forward. And wherever you are, anywhere you are, if you can find one and teach one, like Katherine said, I think that's the only way that we can move this forward, because the powers that be don't necessarily want everyone educated and protected and encouraged to be their own entity. And I think that's what blockchain does.
I think that's a really profound statement right there. There's gatekeeping, and it's not just in blockchain, it's everywhere in the world where there's power, where there's influence, where there's money. You're going to find gatekeeping, and there's some people, like maybe it's human nature. I don't know what percentages are who and what, but I've encountered a lot of gatekeeping in my career, and it frustrates me to no end. And I feel just mad thinking about examples, right? But we can't be the gatekeepers keeping people out. I mean, if you're in a position, we need to be like the welcoming committee and say, hey, here are these resources. Here's how you can get started. Here are some people you should talk to. For if anyone's still listening to this, I mean, and maybe the people that already know who are, but I'm always willing to share my knowledge, right? Because it plugs me into the network as a node. I want to be a node in the network, and anyone can be a node, and they need to feel welcome to that it's open source, it's permissionless, like a public blockchain, the human version. You kind of have to think of yourself, everyone I think that is trying to get into this space wants to be a node, but then there's all these people, the incumbent kind of people that have been in this space who are thinking, I want this to be a permission, private, exclusive club. And that's not the ethos of the technology, and it's not what's going to drive, adoption, inclusion.
The next billion.
It's what's going to drive this technology to not go anywhere, right? So
our experiences bring insight. When I, moved to New York from Wisconsin and started working at Fried Frank, where everything felt foreign to me, and the way that people talked, it sounded like they were yelling at each other and everybody was angry. I did as much as I could to kind of have my professional existence and, divorce it from everything in my personal background. I didn't put a picture of my daughter on my desk because I didn't want people to think, oh, she's putting family first and she's not going to work as hard as other people. I didn't talk about those things, but
Breaks my heart.
Yeah, and being a single mom, I actually had a lot of experiences that others didn't have that I could bring to the table and share. And so what I strive to do now, when now that I'm head of people ops and I have an amazing team that's totally on board with this, is we try to create a culture that really values those personal experiences and insights, and recognize that there's little distinction between your work and the rest of your life, and that there's a richness that comes when you can be comfortable to be yourself and know that that's value, and bring all of those parts to work.
You're all the pieces of yourself, whether it's your digital life, your work life, your home life, your family life. And we have to manage those masks. And nowadays, there's really not any separation between that. I can scroll and see people lost a parent, or went on vacation, or bought a new house, or got a new vehicle, or volunteering and cooking meals in the Philippines. But the digital connection is there. I think the inclusion that you guys speak of is something that I see as well when we're out in our separate spaces. And I think what's probably most important here is that there are people like you, that there is a girl who can look up and see, I can be that, or there's a kid who can look up and say, I can be that. And when we give them that hope, Viktor Frankl says, you can't end someone's hope. They have to choose to do it themselves, right? He talks about when you smoke your own cigarettes, you can't be given up. We just got to show people hope, and then from there, see what happens, because we will craft our own destiny.
Yeah.
It's whether we own it or somebody else.
Well said.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone who's on there. We will send out the recording.
Yeah, we're gonna then open that a little bit.
Okay.